Are you giving your child a dose of vitamin N? Do you know where to find it in your home?
We're raising up kids to be godly kids and godly adults someday. And we're not apologizing for it. You know, just because somebody disagrees with our worldview, we can still love them, but we're not gonna adapt to a worldview that's contrary to Scripture.
And this is where vitamin N is no for now, but not forever. Joining us today, Dave and Ashley Willis are here to help us understand what it means to raise godly children, in many cases, in a world that is falling apart. Dave and Ashley are the hosts of the Naked Marriage podcast. They're speakers at the XO Marriage Conference, and they're tremendous authors. Dave, Ashley, thank you for being here, and thank you for sharing your wisdom with us about this important topic. You know, one of the things that I recognize has significantly shifted from my childhood to my kids' childhood is when I was a kid, it seemed like the majority of parents agreed on what a well-behaved child was.
What was right and what was wrong.
You know, in my neighborhood growing up, any dad could correct any kid. And every dad appreciated the correction. In my neighborhood growing up, if you were out playing basketball or football in the street and one dad had a glass of iced tea in a lawn chair, the whole block was safe. You know, because Mr. Smith was out watching the kids play in the street, so somebody was taking care of all the kids in the neighborhood. Now, there are such wide variations and spectrums of belief on what good behavior is. It's hard to find people that hold values in common.
It's so true. Yeah, they've shifted so drastically right before our eyes, and the sense of community is broken down. Used to, a good neighbor was somebody that was always there for you, watching out for you. Now a good neighbor is somebody that never talks to you.
Correct.
They keep themselves.
The other way.
Exactly.
We've got doorbells with videos so we can look. I'm not answering that.
Right.
So where do you look, and how do you define those values in your family and then establish them for your children? Because everything that they're exposed to is very different.
Well, I think that God calls us as Christians really to not only kind of fit culture, but to establish culture wherever we go. To say, like in our home, this is going to be the culture. It's going to be one of respect, biblical values. And as far as we can in the community around us, we're going to live that out and love people that way, even if it's weird to them. I think within our churches, you know, we need to be creating culture that does the same, that reinforces some of those principles you were talking about. We're looking out for each other. We're raising up kids to be godly kids and godly adults someday. And we're not apologizing for it. You know, just because somebody disagrees with our worldview, we can still love them, but we're not gonna adapt to a worldview that's contrary to Scripture.
You know, the New Testament talks about people of faith and people who have their life found in Christ as peculiar people. And when I was a kid, I used to think, well, what's so peculiar? But now, when you look at the values that you hold in a family of faith versus the values of the world, you are peculiar. You know, dad is sir, mom is ma'am. You use words. You know, I mean, my kids communicate. And people tell me all the time, like, your kids are really well-spoken. And I'm like, no, they just talk. You know?
We make them talk.
As opposed to kids that look at you and go, it seems peculiar, but it's appropriate because this is how you were supposed to interact. When you live in a world where we can't put any pressure on them, we have to, you know, keep them. We have to keep them from every kind of struggle. Where do you as a parent realize, and how do you go about it to where, hey, it's okay if my friends, my peers don't agree with how I parent. The outcome that I'm looking for in my kid is what I'm interested in.
I think it's good to agree on those things and talk about it as a family. And, you know, we've had, even in our community that has a lot of Christian people, we decided a long time ago, we were like, we want to be that home where we can invite kids from all walks of life in. Because even though we are, you know, there's a lot of Christians in our community, we're in a military community, you have people from all walks of life, in different belief systems. We had some neighborhood kids that spent a lot of time at our house, and we love that. We wanted to be that house. We had a trampoline, we bought that specifically, not only for our children, but so that neighborhood kids could come through. And there was one day we were having pizza, we do pizza on Fridays, and the kids came home from school and these kids were there with them. And Dave said, well, let me bless the meal. And he goes, and in fact, I'm going to say a special prayer for our friends that are here all the time. So we all said our prayer, and he prayed specifically for these kids. And after the prayer, the kids looked kind of astonished, and they looked at us and they said, "That is the first time anyone's ever prayed for me."
Wow.
And they were a little teary-eyed, and they were like, "That was so nice, thank you." And we come to find out that their parents were not believers, and it was because there had been a lot of loss in their life. And, as a family, when they were not there, when those kids weren't in the room, our kids, we were talking about it with them, and we got to share with them, listen, we may be different, but we're supposed to be a light to the world.
Yeah.
And this is a wonderful opportunity to love our friends.
One of the words we use to describe love and affection is warmth.
Yes, warmth.
And when people who are lost in a cold world feel the warmth of the affection in your home, they crave it.
They crave it.
Yeah.
I never had to wonder what friends that I had as a child were longing for family because they were the ones like, "Hey, what's going on at your house this weekend?" And I'm like, "Dude, get out of my back pocket. You're always with me." But it was because the environment that they felt in my home was
craved
something
it.
that, they were dying for it. Mom and dad sitting down at the table and sharing food together. They never ate together, Dad asking you how your day went. Their dads never talked to them, all these details that I took for granted that I was just in this environment of comfort, they were craving.
Yeah.
And I think it helps people that might feel like, hey, we're the lone rangers of righteousness out here trying to raise our family in the biblical manner. The world wants what you have.
Yes,
Yes.
they do.
They're
Yes.
desperate for it. The kids especially.
Absolutely.
Yes. Talking about putting your, y'all talk about how to have God, your husband, your kids third. And that's one of the questions. They're like, one of the moms says, "But I always want to look at my husband as he's one of my fourth kids." How do you balance that? And how do you get that in alignment of according to what God's word says?
First, for a man, never put yourself in a position where your wife feels like she has to raise you. You need to be responsible to be a responsible man. But wives never treat your husband, and husbands don't treat your wives as a child. But that's going to mess up the whole dynamic. You married a partner, not an extra kid. And so I think whenever we take on that dynamic in marriage, it really throws things all out of balance.
There's times where I'll look at Kendal and be, "Look, I'm the one that gave you the 4. I'm not the 5th of 4. And so she's nurturing, she's making sure that all these details are taken care of. And I think as a husband, it's important for me to realize why she's doing it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
She's taking care of the household, and I'm part of the household, so she wants to take care of me too. But at the same time, to be able to say, "No, I'm a little different.
I'm your husband."
I get to make my own decisions here. We can talk about those things, but be willing to balance the two so that you don't find yourself stuck in, well, this is just how it goes in our house, and we don't have any identity or relationship outside of raising these kids.
Exactly.
Because that becomes a problem when the kids leave. Who are you now?
Yeah, you have an empty nest and an empty marriage. When you let your kids see the example of a strong marriage, you put your marriage first, that actually, it doesn't hurt the kids, it helps the kids. It gives them security, it gives them strength, it gives them an example to follow. And then after those kids move up and move out, then your marriage is in a place where you can enjoy each other the rest of your lives, keep building that legacy multi-generationally. But when we say, well, for the next 20 years, we're just focused all on the kids, we'll come back to the marriage part later, there's usually not a marriage to come back to.
Yeah, it's a recipe for disaster in many cases. When we come back, we're going to talk about one of the most powerful things that you can give to your child. It's a vitamin. It's in your house right now. It's vitamin N, the word no.
Sometimes we get so caught up in the busyness of the day-to-day that we forget to do the simple things in life, such as exchanging a friendly greeting with our neighbors. It is time to be God's love in action, like the Good Samaritan. We are called to love our neighbors as ourselves. Does your life reflect His truth? We are called to be salt and light. Our actions and lifestyles need to reflect the light of Jesus to those around us. We are a living testimony of God's goodness. If we are not shining God's love on those around us, then who will they turn to? This month, with a special gift of any amount to the ministry, we'll send you a special Not by Bread Alone salt box. For your generous gift of $250 or more, we'll also send you a signed copy of Diana Hagee's commemorative cookbook, Not by Bread Alone, accompanied by an apron, cookbook stand, dish towel, and salt box. This set makes a special gift for a loved one. We are called to love our neighbors as ourselves. Call the number on the screen or go to jhm.org/bread.
Welcome back to The Difference. There is times where you think, do I say no or can I say yes?
When I was growing up, everything was wrong. So I got plenty of vitamin N.
Yeah.
No, you can't dance. No, you can't go to movies. No, you can't do this. No, you can't do that. And the thing that I noticed about kids who lived in that environment is the second that they were liberated from all of those nonsensical rules that really had no purpose,
Yeah.
they went crazy.
Yeah.
They didn't go to a movie. They went and tried to break all 10 commandments in the weekend.
Yes.
You know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And so I saw this imbalance. There's times that no is absolutely the right thing to say.
Yes.
And then there's times when no means not now, but later.
Yeah.
And then there's times when you need to really think about, why am I saying no to this? Am I saying no to this because it wasn't provided to me as a kid?
Yeah.
That's good.
And I want to withhold it? How do you as parents utilize vitamin N, no, when you live in a world that's so permissive? How do you use vitamin N in your house?
Well, Ashley's better at it than me. She's, because I'm like, I could be talked into to
You're
stuff.
just
They
super
work
nice.
me.
I love how nice
It's
and kind
negotiable.
you are.
It's negotiable. Yeah, let's work on your negotiation skills.
Correct.
You know what
It's
you
the
got?
art of the
Sell
deal.
me on it. I think though that no vitamin N is so helpful, and I've gotten better at it,
Yes.
especially as it relates to just certain boundaries in place, and the argument, well, so and so gets to do it, or the neighbor gets to do it, never works. I'm like, well, you know, I'm not going to stand before God and give an account of how I raised the neighbor. You know, so like,
Correct.
so that doesn't really matter. So certain rules about like we're not going to have no screens in the rooms was
we
a
don't do any
rule that
screens in the
Ashley, it was her idea,
That's good,
and I'm like that's so good
Like
because
laptop
the kids
or TV
the
or
kids
like-
hated it. They're like, we can't have a TV, we can't have
What
a
about my
tablet,
alarm clock? That's my
anything.
alarm clock.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's my alarm. And we were like, well, no screens in the rooms. And now, like, the kids go up at night, they're off screens, they read, you know, they journal,
They sleep
they
soundly.
And they
actually
They
get
don't
sleep.
have all the lights. Yes.
And but if you let the kids make all the decisions, the house is going to be a train wreck. Kids don't know what they need. I try to say yes anytime a kid wants to do something with me. They wanted like Dad, let's go shoot baskets or whatever. Let's go shoot hoops. Like I try to, no matter what I'm doing, if possible, get up and do that. Because I'm
he
like,
really
there's going to
does.
come a time when they don't want to,
do it.
Yeah.
and I don't want to miss these moments.
Yeah.
But in terms of like, can I have something that's in the long run not going to be good for them? We try to say no more often. And again,
Exactly.
Ashley's way better than me.
Correct.
Because I'm like, you've only been on the iPad 10 hours today. It's fine. It's, you know, you're.
You got no
goodness.
warning. You're good.
You're quiet.
You're preoccupied with that. Go ahead. I gotta cook dinner.
I've enjoyed the quiet. It's fine. Just keep it going.
You know, as parents, you have to come to a place of agreement about why.
Yeah.
Yes,
A-
definitely.
and then support each other. You know, for example, you're talking about screens in the room. Sometimes you bring your situation as a child into your parenting, and you think that whatever it was that you had is the appropriate way to go.
Yeah.
Well, my family, we grew up. There were 5 kids, mom and dad, so there were 7, and then there were 2 cousins that came and lived with us. So there were, you know, we went from 5 to 7 kids, 2 parents, 9, in a house that was just over 2,000 square feet. Guess what? Every room had a television.
Yeah.
Television was utilized as your sound machine. You know, mom and dad would turn on the television and say, go to bed. Because that many people in such proximity,
I understand.
all you did was hear everything. And so it was mom and dad's way of creating privacy was noise. Kendall grew up in a house out in the country on a farm where
didn't
when the
have
lights
one
went out,
television
everything went
and 2
quiet.
channels,
You know,
so-
when we came into our marriage and we're starting to raise children, she's like, they don't need a TV in their room. I'm like, how are they going to live without one?
Yeah.
You know, and
Yes.
only by willingly accepting, hey, I might not have had the most normal circumstance, realizing the benefits of creating spaces for you and your kids to interact instead of separate.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, that's been a much better path than if we'd have done it my way, because I'd have said, yeah, you know, I mean, give them, you know, 674 channels.
Well, these days they do have that. I mean, they have more access, and that's why.
Yes.
Like I grew up, I love TV, and I told Dave honestly, our thought behind this was I love it too much, and I have to go to bed with the TV. Like it's just how I grew up.
Yeah, it's how I shut off my day.
Same,
Yeah.
Exactly the same. And so I said, I really would love for a new path to happen with our kids. We actually ended up instituting a new rule where when they're 16, they have the choice if they would like a TV. And do you know our oldest could care less. He
care
was
less.
like, even now, he's like,
Don't need it.
Our second one was like, are you serious?
Yeah, so one of the rules in our house is you can't date until you're 17.
Yeah.
Mom and dad want to observe how you engage in this behavior before you leave the house so that we
that's
can
good.
help hit some guidelines just in case you need some tuning up. You know, that's one. Two, a date, and you know, I had parents, you know, at our school with our children, they're like, hey, I understand that your daughter can't date until she's 17. That's correct. You know, and they're like, well, my son would like to take her out. I was like, well, she's not 17. You know? And they're like, well, I'm like, listen, does your son drive a car? No. So you gonna pick her up? Yeah. Does he have a job? No. So you're gonna pay for whatever they do? Yeah. So is she going on a date with you or is she going on a date with him? You know? And I'm not trying to say, you know, you're redefining dating or something, but what I'm trying to do is teach my daughter that you want a man who has the resources to take care of you, has the responsibility of picking you up and getting you home safely. This is what you date, you know? That's just a friendship with a boy who's borrowing mommy's money to go out and do something, you know?
Right.
And if you start off that way, you'll marry a boy who's borrowing mommy's money to be your husband. You know,
That's
I'm like,
good.
you
Yeah.
need to go,
That's
and I'm like, it has nothing to do with you. I'm trying to raise her. And this is where vitamin N is no for now, but not forever.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's so good.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah, that's a good policy.
It is.
I like it.
Yeah, the kids, they're not so happy about it. But I mean,
They like to say, well,
yeah. And it helps for us to understand that because that's different than either of us were raised. You know, no dating. You know, and I mean, she's like, but I was dating when I was a freshman. I was like, and how'd that turn out for you? You know, and I'm like, since that guy's such a big part of your life now, you know, and she's like, well, okay, you're right. I think there's a lot that you have to do whenever you enter into these conversations so that you understand that what you're striving for is the right outcome.
Yeah.
Yes.
Outcome-based parenting.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Where do we want to be when they're our age?
That's good. That's
it.
good.
When we come back, we're going to talk more, not only about outcome-based parenting, but we're going to talk about the benefits of teaching your children what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. It's a big conversation. You don't want to miss it. You're watching The Difference.
I'm so grateful that I chose differently. I'm so happy that I chose you. I get to see you become the person God intended you to be. I'm grateful for Sanctuary of Hope, for preparing me, for guiding me. Most importantly, Sanctuary of Hope is my safe place. It's where I can lay my baby's head down and know that God has His shield of protection over us. Thank you, Hagee Ministry Legacy Partners. Because of you, my baby has a chance. Because of you, I had the option to choose life.
There has never been a better time to share the love of Christ with a mother and a child than right now. When you partner with Hagee Ministries, your legacy impacts lives and transforms a nation. Call today or go to jhm.org/partner.
This is a hot button issue, teaching your kids about pornography, letting them know that this exists. Because a lot of times when kids are first exposed to pornography, they're not looking for it, it's looking for them.
Wow, that is a hot topic. So pornography, what age now are they saying that kids are being exposed to this? Yeah.
Well, I mean, we try to keep an eye on the stats, and the stats are always changing because pornography producers, they're trying to hook kids. I mean, there's a real agenda. And right now, the average age of first exposure is somewhere around 9. And it's just tragic. The kids are being exposed, and the images that are being locked in their minds at those young, impressionable ages are happening. And the kid's usually not even looking for it.
No,
I mean, it's just,
pops up.
it pops up,
Yes.
or you know, it pops up on someone else's, and they're like, oh my goodness, look at this. And the next thing you know, those images are locked in, and it starts them on a pathway of their first exposure to anything related to sex being a very worldly, broken counterfeit, as opposed to what God's plan for sex
Very
is.
selfish. Sex is God's design.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's God's idea. And this was something that struck me as I was really studying Genesis and the relationship of Adam and Eve. God told them in innocence, be fruitful and multiply.
Yes.
So their intimate sexual relationship was a part of God's innocent plan.
Yeah.
And then the second that they wrecked it, They just got cursed. They just got kicked out of the garden. You read in the Bible, and Adam knew his wife Eve. So it's like, hang on, honey, I just ruined the world for all of mankind. Would you like to go to bed? You know, I mean, so it's like, in their innocence, they had this sexual relationship. And then when they are in a fallen state, they had a sexual relationship. And what hit me is, there's a right and a wrong way to do everything.
Absolutely, yeah.
In their innocence, their intention was to gratify one another. In their fallen status, their intention was to gratify self.
Yes.
Yeah.
Adam needed to be comforted because he just felt bad about wrecking the world. And he thought, well, Eve's here, she can comfort me. Eve needed to be comforted because, you know, she just got cursed with all the different things she's been cursed with. Here's Adam, he'll comfort me. And even in biblical marriages, even in our relationships, whenever you are engaging in this intimate and beautiful thing that God created, if you're engaging in it without the intent of gratifying your partner, you're not doing it in the way that God designed it to be done.
Right.
This is something that your children should know about, and the world is doing everything it can to pervert it because pornography is all about self-satisfaction, self-fulfillment. It is a total and complete perversion of what God intended.
I've lived that from having had a past problem with pornography, but we do a lot of work trying to help people break free. On the Naked Marriage podcast recently, we interviewed a guy named Joshua Broom, who's an inspiration. He's a pastor now, born-again follower of Jesus, but in his earlier life, he had been in the adult film industry as an actor in that world. He got kind of pulled into it through deception as a very, very young man. He talks about the brokenness in it. He said in the decade since I've left, he said, I have about 100 people that I know of that are associates or friends who are now dead by either suicide or drug overdose. Behind that kind of glossy veneer that those adult film producers are creating, there is a brokenness and a desperation and a hurt that is involved in almost every person who's involved in it. And so it's just one of those areas where I think the enemy is trying to push that out and convince people this is what sex is supposed to be. But God's plan is something, you know, so much better. It's so much more beautiful. But we have to commit first before we teach our kids. We've got to commit first that it's not going to be a part of our lives.
That's right. I was going to say, it starts with
that's
you.
where it starts.
It does.
100%.
It does.
And how you bring it up to your kids. I think it's important too, as parents, if they do have a video that they show you, let them be comfortable talking to you about, because if you are like, oh, you should not be looking at that, they're going to end up hiding things from you.
Exactly.
So an open communication about sex, about pornography, so they'll come to you with those questions rather than hide it from you.
Exactly. And let me tell you, that's hard sometimes. Like, we want to be that safe place. And when your kids see you as that and come to you, they're going to ask you questions that you may not even at the time be equipped, and you cannot act shocked. Like, I mean, I've had moments where they'll
You may have to step out of the room for a second and then come back in and deal with it.
Seriously.
Or you just look at them and all the courage, you say, ask your mother.
Yeah. That's right.
She'll tell
Mom
you.
knows.
She's the
not
nurse.
me.
Go talk to her.
Ask your mom. I
She's
don't know.
medically trained.
That's right.
She's a professional.
But it is so true, because you can feel ill-equipped, but it's like you can tell them, listen, I'm so glad you came to me.
Yes.
I don't always have all the answers, but you know what? I'm going to go find them, because I don't, you know, I tell our kids, I'm like, don't go looking on the internet.
No.
Don't go even asking your friends. I'm glad you came to me. I'm going to tell you honestly what this is, because a lot of times they'll have questions about some slang term for something sexual, or just general
And the
questions.
terms change.
And they do.
Yes.
I'm like,
They
well, that's
do.
not what we called it.
Exactly.
I know, it's so
that.
true, but we educate ourselves, and it's not, you know, I really had to train myself to not be shocked, and they still come back. I mean, the kids still come back and ask questions, and that's such a goal for us as parents.
Yes.
We always want them to feel comfortable to come to us.
And I know with Matt, he would take the boys and say, come lay down on the bed. We're going to have a man's cave talk.
So I went to our son, our oldest son. His friend's mother's called and was like, our son's been asking some questions. If your son says these words, maybe he heard them from my son. And, you know, Kendal comes to me and she says, what do you think about this? And I said, not a chance. And she says, why? I said, well, that particular boy is the youngest of 4. He's got 3 older brothers. Of course he's heard those words.
Yeah.
Right.
And I said, ours is the oldest boy. He has no context for this.
Right.
And she's like, you need to go talk to him. And I'm like, not at 8 years
You
old.
need to go talk to
Yeah, and she's sending me in there, you know. And so I was trying to figure out, how do I open up this conversation without stripping his innocence?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I sat down with him and I was like, son, this is your bed, this is your bedroom. I said, if I ever come in here and you see me take off my boots, take off my socks, and lay on the bed, I was like, we're no longer in your bedroom, we're now in manland. And he's like, manland? I love manland, Dad. And I'm like, and I was like, and when we go to manland, we're gonna talk man to man. Man to man, I love man to man, Dad. And I'm like, anything you want to know as a man, you ask me. Any word you want to say, you say it. I said, anything that we need to discuss, you discuss it. But when I get out of manland, I'm gonna put my socks and my boots back on. We're back in the house. You're now the son, I'm the dad. Manland's over. And there's like 2 minutes of awkward silence. And I'm like, Lord, please don't let him have any questions. Please don't let him have any questions, please. And he's like, Dad, I was wondering. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, in WWE, when they pour beer on the opponent, is that legal? And I'm like, it most certainly is not, you know, and that's just a stunt, son. That's not even beer. It's apple juice, you know, which I was relieved that we were talking about something as silly as wrestling, right?
Yes.
And I get up and walk out of the room, and Kendall's like got her ear to the door.
I'm right there listening.
And
I
she's
gotta
like,
make sure the
I
terms.
heard talking. What did he say?
said,
And
what
I'm
did
like,
he say?
nothing.
Tell me.
And
It's manland. I
yeah,
can't
exactly.
reveal it.
I'm like, and so, you know, you have to find ways to have this conversation. But I think one of the powerful things that, you know, we saw in your clip there, in tough topics, let your kids know you know about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, there's nothing as comforting as a child is knowing Dad knows about this.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
and if I bring it to him, he's got information that will help me.
Absolutely.
You know, and I think a lot of Christian parents, especially, like, if I don't talk about it, they won't find out about it. And
they're
then,
not gonna ask.
and what happens is you never discuss it. And oftentimes it's an entrapment that the enemy has on some member in your household, and you need to be the one that goes and breaks it.
I think sometimes we don't say anything because we're afraid, well, I don't want to get to these awkward conversations where I might have to reveal mistakes I've made.
Correct.
Because we think that our kind of moral, our authority comes from like this being perfect.
Yeah.
But they're not looking for perfection,
No,
they're looking
they're
for
not.
authenticity. And I think in an age-appropriate ways, to be able to share, you know, I didn't always get this right, and I experienced a lot of pain that I want to prevent you from experiencing.
And that's kind of a fulfillment of, you know, Revelation scripture. They overcame by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony.
Yeah.
You can overcome that in the generations of your household if you're willing to share what Christ did to heal you and how it can help your children moving forward. That's one. Two, John 10:10, I've come to give you life and life more abundantly. The enemy has come to steal, to kill, and to destroy. The intimate relationship between husband and wife is something that creates an abundance, not just in children, but in connection and in all of the things that God intends to be in the marriage. The enemy is trying to destroy that long before you find your spouse.
Yeah.
And if you can help your children discern the difference between those two things, then they can declare one to be counterfeit and the other to be something that God has for a benefit.
Yeah, that's good.
And so I think that, you know, helping them understand the difference between no, not now, and never, it's something every one of us has faced, and here's how we overcame it, and here's the benefit of doing it God's way versus the consequences of doing it the world's way. You know, if you're looking for information to help you and your family continue to grow in God's principles, in His truth, to help your marriage, to strengthen your children, I encourage you to go find more content from Dave and Ashley. You can go to the Naked Marriage Podcast. You can find their books covering a myriad of topics. Some of them we discussed on our program today, so much more that we didn't have the time to get into. And if you see an XO conference that you can get to, I cannot tell you enough, get there as fast as you can because you'll be better for it. Kendal and I want to thank you for joining us today. You're watching The Difference.